And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. My name is Pauline Nyjander, and I'm one of the two seminarians here at UU Princeton, and I'll be filling in with the sermon today while Reverend Bill is away. If you're new or visiting us today, welcome. And we extend a special welcome to you for being able to take out and branching out and giving us a try here today. So we do invite you to stop by our welcome table after the service in Robinson Lounge, so through the two doors that you came in here from. And this way we can answer any questions you have and get to know you a little bit better. Again, welcome to our congregation, and we're very happy you decided to join us here today. Surprisingly, we don't have any announcements. Don't worry, it's not a typical thing, but I know it is summer, so things do quiet down a little bit here. But I know there are still things going on in our local community. So make sure you read your little order of service. It has what's going on. We gather here together on this Sunday in the spirit of the principles that we believe in. We gather here together in the spirit of acceptance and in the worth and dignity of those around us as well as ourselves. We gather here together in the spirit of community and to celebrate the diversity that makes us who we are, human. It is through our shared humanity that we work together to build a community that celebrates the gifts and the diversity that each of us brings here. And as a woman, a lesbian, and a trans woman, I am grateful to be welcomed here as I am. And whether you be a guest or a longtime member, wherever you are on your on your journey, know that you are always welcome here. And now let us worship together.
Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. Winston Churchill.
And I invite us to join together in our unison affirmation that is written in your order of service. This is a congregation of open minds, of helping hands, and of loving hearts. Together, we care for our earth and work for friendship and peace in the world.
I remember years ago seeing a family out to dinner at a local restaurant. The kids were playing games on their iPads, and the parents were scrolling on their phones. They were each in their own bubble. The whole scene made me kind of sad. But the truth is, I'm guilty of the same thing. I sometimes half listen to my loved ones while I'm multitasking and can be distracted by any number of things while I'm talking to family members. This is a step somewhere beyond ADHD, which we call ooh shiny, as in, I'm listening, but first I have to look at that shiny object over there. My wonderful husband, Sai, can also be guilty of this. Sometimes when I remind him of an upcoming social event, he'll protest, "You never told me about that." When I give him the date and time I told him, he counters, "Yes, but did it register?" It's a challenge to focus fully on what other people are saying without thinking of your own story or experiences. It can also be challenging to listen to loved ones when you're in an intense conversation or an argument. It's tempting to try to solve the problem or defend yourself or offer advice. Learning to listen fully is one of the gifts of UECP's Chalice Circles, where we all share about various themes and we listen to other people sharing, but our covenant tells us not to respond or give advice or sympathy. This often goes against every impulse you have, but it makes for very deep conversations in which we are forced to listen deeply to each other. As the 13th century mystic poet Rumi puts it, there is a voice that doesn't use words. There's always a risk that people will put you down when you share feelings they view as inappropriate. I had that experience when I told an acquaintance at my kids' school years ago that I was so relieved that Christmas was over. I love Christmas, but I find it exhausting, and that was especially true when my kids were little. "You don't mean that. You're joking," she responded. "I'm not joking," I thought, "but I certainly won't get real with you again." I get that it's sometimes hard to hear others when they're in terrible pain. I had to remind myself recently not to shut a friend down who was grieving for her husband. He had been killed suddenly in a tragic hiking accident, and she was missing her constant companion for 35 years. I feel like throwing myself in the river, she told me. I had to stop myself from telling her not to feel that way. Of course you feel that way. This is a terrible, unimaginable tragedy, I told her. But I couldn't help adding, everyone loves you. Please remember that. I still don't know if I handled that correctly. A few years ago, when my family and I were first dealing with my mother's dementia, a lot of the day-to-day caregiving fell on my brother Tony, who lived with her on Long Island. We had aides, but they were unreliable, and Tony was finding the burden too great to bear. My feeling was that my job was to support both my mom and Tony. So when he called me up and said, "I'm not going to do this anymore," I said, "Okay, I hear you." "I have to do my job. I can't be distracted constantly dealing with mom," he said. "I agree, it's too much for you," I said. "I mean it," he said. "If things don't improve, mom will have to go to a nursing home." "I'll do whatever you want," I told him. "I get that it's too much for you. I will try to find better aides and will help with whatever I can. And if that doesn't work, we'll do whatever you want to do." I found more reliable aides, and we found caregivers who are practically family. And mom remained in her home. But it was important for us to realize that there might come a time when we might have to make a different choice, and that we had to care for our caretakers. I'm still not as good a listener as I would like to be, but I've learned that sometimes you need to take a page from those chalice circles and simply listen as fully as you can.
Generous Listening by Marilyn Nelson. A conversation can be a contest or a game of catch with invisible balloons. They bounce between us, growing and shrinking, sometimes floating like cloud medicine balls, and sometimes bowling at us like round anvils. You toss a phrase and understanding blooms like an anemone of colored lights. My mind fireworks with unasked questions. Who is this miracle speaking to me? And who is this miracle listening? What amazingness are we creating? Out of gray matter, a star spark of thought leaps between synapses into the air and pours through gray matter into my heart. How can I not listen generously?
So I'd like to again thank you, Sue. Thank you, Isabella, Jeannie, Reverend Jennifer. Without their assistance, this service wouldn't have come off as well as it has. So thank you to all of you, and thank you for having me back up here at the pulpit. There's a fun video that was introduced to me some number of years ago on YouTube that I had forgotten about until a good friend had reintroduced it to me for a project that I had to do for one of my classes while I was still working on my Master of Divinity. The video itself is about 2 minutes in length, and it is about a conversation that is happening between a man and a woman. Presumably, the two are in a relationship based on their interaction throughout the video, and the video starts up with a close-up view of the woman's face. Now, she begins talking about having all of this pressure going on in her life, and that she can sometimes just feel all of this pressure on her head relentlessly. She begins to talk about her fear that this pressure may never go away. And then the woman turns her head and the camera angle changes, and we, the audience, can see that sticking right out from the middle of her forehead, in a non-gruesome way, mind you, is a rather large metal nail. Now, we're not the only ones that can see this nail, as the next angle shows her partner, a man that might be her boyfriend or her husband, nodding and understanding, all while staring rather concernedly right at the nail in the middle of this woman's forehead. And then, at least to the woman's perspective, the man makes his first mistake. He starts to immediately point out that she has a nail in her head. A vehement response from the woman follows that it is not about the nail. And the two go back and forth with the man trying to fix the problem by suggesting that removing the nail, it would fix all of her problems. But the woman immediately counters, asking the man to stop trying to fix it. You always try to fix things when all I really need is for you to just listen. The man finally acquiesces and agrees to listen, allowing the woman to finish talking about what she is feeling, and he responds by reflecting back to her that it must be really hard to have to deal with all of that pressure. The woman, grateful, places her hand on his arm and thanks him, and then the two move to kiss, and she hits her head with the nail against the man, and the two begin arguing yet again about the nail. I wonder how many of us can relate to the two in the story. Well, maybe without the nail in one person's head, hopefully. But how many of us relate to the positions that the two take? One wanting to have someone just listen to them and not solve their problems for them, while the other has put on their hard hat, ready to help the person overcome whatever adversity it is that is causing the distress. I would also posit these questions for us to think about. What does it feel like when all we want is for someone to listen and acknowledge how we're feeling, but the person keeps trying to tell us what to do? What does it feel like when someone makes the time to make sure that we feel listened to, and I might say, to make sure that we feel heard? I think that that feeling of being listened to and heard can mean many different things to all of us. But for me, when I feel heard, all of that pressure and stress that I have been feeling just feels lighter. Now, the problems don't magically go away, and I know that I still have a lot of work to do in order to tackle those problems. But it feels as if someone has opened the pressure relief valve, and that load of stress that had been sitting on my shoulders and my back just doesn't seem as bad anymore. That I don't feel alone in this, and most importantly, I feel heard and acknowledged. For my day job, I still work at the New Jersey Division of Taxation, and having answered the occasional telephone calls from upset individuals, there were some that needed to vent about their frustrations over how things were being handled by this giant faceless state entity. The person isn't angry with me per se. Instead, the anger is more at needing to be placed on hold for as long as they have been, and the frustration just bubbles over as their particular problem hadn't been resolved as quickly as they had hoped. I think that at some point in our lives, we've all been there. And in those situations, when we're on the receiving end of that, it's best to not take it personally. Or if we're doing the venting, doing our best to not make it a personal attack. And when we're done, the situation still hasn't changed, but we may feel better for having released that pressure. And hopefully the person on the other end can acknowledge the frustration of the situation with the understanding that they too may be in a similar position at some point in the future. Whether or not the situation does get resolved in the person's favor, that's a whole other story. But the interaction usually moves much smoother, and usually any bad news that needs to be delivered is received in at least a more level-headed manner, because their feelings have, to some degree, been acknowledged and, most importantly, heard. But what does it mean to listen to someone, let alone to listen to someone with love? In order to understand what we mean by this, I think we need to tackle it in parts. What does it mean to listen? To truly listen so that we're hearing someone regardless of who they are. First off, it probably means doing the most difficult thing that many of us may not be comfortable with doing. I will admit that this is something that took me a long time to learn to become comfortable with. And what am I speaking of exactly? learning to become comfortable in silence. Many people do not like the sound of silence when there are two or more people sharing a space. And inevitably, one person or the other will begin to speak because of what feels like an uncomfortable situation. But if we become comfortable in the silence, it becomes an invitation for the one sharing the space with us to speak. And they usually will, because they themselves are not comfortable with the silence. Next, for all you fixers out there, as difficult as it may seem, it means removing your construction hard hat and not bringing up the nail that is stuck inside someone's head, at least not directly. Listening to, or more importantly, hearing someone does not involve fixing their problems for them or offering unsolicited, keyword unsolicited, solutions to them on how to fix their problems. So what are we supposed to do then? To put something not so simple, simply, we do active listening. We can do a whole day long workshop on active listening, but I don't have that kind of time up here in just one sermon. So I'm just going to give a brief summary here. In short, it is a combination of nonverbal cues given to us by the person speaking, paying attention as the listener, reflecting back to the speaker the things that they may be feeling in a non-judgmental way, and asking questions that have the speaker clarify or expand upon what they're sharing. Now then, what does it mean to do something with love? Now, for me, this is a bit of a failing in the English language, especially since I learned how to speak another language at the same time growing up. And I will admit that I struggle with this at times because the one definition of the word love that we see defined most often is that of amorous love or romantic love, not really focusing on any of the other definitions. But that's not what we mean when we say that we're doing something with love. And what's interesting is that I'm sure if we went around the room, we would all have similar but very different definitions on what doing something with love actually means. But for me, in short, it means you're doing it with a passion. It is usually non-transactional in the sense that it means you're not expecting something in return if another individual is involved, but it usually gives you a gift in return, and it's usually an unexpected but good gift that you end up receiving in the process. Lastly, your attitude, or rather how you approach the activity, is what makes an act of love an act of love. Listening as an act of love can be incredibly challenging, especially when it is done with a stranger or even someone that we do not care for. But a colleague at a chaplaincy seminar I attended recently shared a poignant way to look at listening. Listening to someone is a gift. And if we approach it with the sense of joy and wonder and mystery of opening a gift on a holiday or for our birthday, then we're doing it right. Now, with our definition on what listening with love looks like in place, I suppose the next question we might ask is why? Why should we listen with love? Listening is how we help others feel heard and feel valued. In this day and age where we sometimes have a tendency to form divisions between the people that we speak with and interact with, it becomes extra important if we ever intend to heal those divisions. Because how can we as UUs claim that love is at the center of our values if we aren't willing to listen and understand, with love, why someone feels the way that they do? But most importantly, listening as an act of love is an opportunity for us to be able to make someone not feel alone when they're going through incredibly difficult and traumatic times in their lives. From September 2023 to April 2024, I had the honor and privilege of doing my clinical pastoral education in a hospital setting at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital in Hamilton, New Jersey. Another name that may sound familiar to what I was doing would be chaplaincy. For those that are unsure what this means exactly, it means that I would move through the local hospital to visit patient rooms and interact with the patients and their families and be there as someone who can just listen. We were there for medical alerts when a patient's vital signs were dropping, and when needed, we were there as a quiet, calming presence at the death of a family's loved one. And over the course of this period of time, I visited countless patients. Many did not wish to speak, but many did. And despite the countless patients I visited with, the ones that stuck out the most to me, that made me feel as if I had done the most good with the patient, are the interactions where I listened with love the most. The first is of a patient's family member who was there as a medical alert was called on her father. I arrived in my typical fashion, name badge on display indicating that I was the chaplain currently on duty. And after briefly introducing myself, I just stood there with a silent invitation present to the daughter that I was there if she needed. She ended up taking that invitation, and we found ourselves sitting in one of the hospital waiting rooms while the doctors and nurses worked at making sure her father was okay. She talked and talked and talked and talked about the situation, about her relationship with her father and the rest of her family. And I listened. And before we knew it, almost 2 hours had elapsed. And the daughter made the comment of, I never really talked about this with anyone. And you could just see the visible release of stress in that trying time. The second was having the ability to speak with a patient that had just had a health scare. I was blessed to be there to listen as he probably let out a decade's worth of tears that he had been holding in as he shared his life's story, the challenges that he faced as a single father after the death of his spouse, and the fears of what would happen to his family if the worst should happen to him. I say that this was a blessing to be there because I was there to listen with love and to not pass judgment, nor was I there to fix any problem, but to be there to help lighten the load for someone going through a traumatic situation. This too became a situation where before I knew it, a few hours' time had elapsed. It is those situations where we listen, truly listen, and do so with love. Those are the situations where we can feel that we can do the most good. It doesn't matter if the person is of the same faith, gender, sexuality, income status, age. Oftentimes, I was very different from the person speaking, but it was those moments where we approach the situation with listening with love that none of those differences really mattered in the end. Now, as we continue forward with our day and in the weeks and months ahead, I would encourage us to approach listening with love. It's not an easy thing to do, and it takes plenty of practice. But when you think about how it makes you feel when you have been on the receiving end of someone listening to you with love, why not do your best to do the same to someone else, especially in these hectic times? Blessed be, and amen. Our chalice extinguishing quote comes from the words of Brian Keeley. The chalice is now extinguished, but its light lives on in the minds and hearts and souls of each one of you. Carry that flame with you as you leave this place and share it with those you know, with those you love, and most especially with those you have yet to meet. And for our benediction, may love and compassion guide you in all that you do. May wisdom help you to seek responsible truths and meanings. May inspiration lead you to new places, and may the hope you bring be a beacon for others. May you share your beautiful gifts with the world. Blessed be, and amen.